Mr. Frederick?
Here.
Mr. Gabarski?
Here.
Mr. Kopak?
Here.
Ms. Turner? Absent. Mr. Teague is absent as well. We also have Carmen Forte, Village Attorney, PZZA Liaison Jerry Johnson is absent,
As well as Mike.
as well as the liaison, the village board, Mike Millette, and Secretary Jim Brown.
I'll just let you annotate, just briefly annotate this. Amend that.
Yeah, amend that.
It's impressive.
Liaison Jerry Johnson is now in the building. He's present.
Okay. First item, after the roll call is the motion to approve the minutes of the zoning commission for the meeting of February 7th, 2024. I took a look at those and I have just one minor typo, that's all I have.
Motion to approve.
Motion to make one. So, I have a motion to approve.
Second.
And a second, is there any discussion?
Page 6, first paragraph. Apparently we've added another member to the committee.
Let's see, page 5.
This is Mr. Stopak. I assume
Oh,
they
okay.
mean me.
No, sorry.
That's like Saint Copac.
All right.
Not yet.
All right, and your correction?
Page 1, second paragraph, third line. It wasn't just an agricultural committee, it was Teague, just a typo.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Alright. That will be the motion to approve the minutes. Yes. So, motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
So that, motion to approve that second.
I'll second.
A second, okay. Then, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries to approve the minutes as amended. All right, next item on the agenda is public comment. All right, is it Clay Stevens, is that correct?
Yeah,
Would you
You go
like to
first.
speak?
well, yeah, I go. So,
So just real quick, I don't have a timer or anything up here, so you get 3 minutes?
I'll be short.
Yeah, okay, so
So-
if I wave my hand, it's time's up, right? Go ahead, sir.
We live off Pinto Lane, up here off, Burlington and Pinto. In the equestrian neighborhood, we have a 3-acre property. From what I understand with the zoning that has happened, we had a part of our barn that collapsed under the weight of snow in the big snowstorm. Our insurance company's covered the repairs. Our contractor cannot get a straight answer on what we are allowed to do with the barn because of whatever the zoning is now, whether we can or can't have barns, if our barn collapses, are we allowed to rebuild? So we have a barn with a damaged awning with horses that we can't get a straight answer on how we get this fixed. So I don't know what's in the zoning for this or exactly how it should be zoned or what happened with the zoning, but we're just looking for clarification on that neighborhood over there and what exactly we are allowed to do or what we can or can't do.
Okay.
Just hoping that we can get something straightened out so that we're allowed to have horses, we're also allowed to have barns, because they kind of go hand in hand.
Okay,
Ralph, can I ask a question?
sure.
Have you contacted anybody at the village yet?
Yeah,
And what was the response?
they couldn't give us a good answer because they didn't know what the zoning rules were for what we were allowed to do.
Good. Thank you. I don't know about the last name, Jason?
Oh, that's me.
Jodas?
That's me.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm in the same neighborhood, just off, Palomino.
Okay.
Question number 1, I guess, was what was the reasoning behind changing the zoning of the area? That's number 1. Question number 2 was, let's see here, we have 3.5 acre property in land, and I was told if I knocked it down, I was the one that actually contacted someone, from his neighbor, contractor. If I knocked down my existing barn, I was not able to build another one in its place. And again, the zoned residential area was zoned something else different before. So if I knock it down, I'm not able to replace it with something, even though I have to have a place to put my animals, but I can't have a structure. Is it just because it's called a barn, or is it, could I say garage? I guess that's really my question. Is it the name that I'm calling it, or is it I can't have a structure, period, on a 3.5 acre property?
I could respond because I talked to him, and I did some further investigation. When you called, you know, we get these calls and I don't really have time to dig into it. So you were correct, you made the point that I'm allowed to have horses and I need to have a shelter for it, that's correct. We have an issue that I hope to correct here. There's a table that gives accessory structures, and things like barns are not listed in it. You have to go, you can infer that you can have a stable or a barn by the provisions on keeping animals, but in the table that actually lists the accessory structures where you have, barn is nowhere to be found. And that's what I was looking at. And when you pointed it out, I said, you're probably right, you can contact me again, or I urged you to come to the meeting. So you should be able to have that structure, and there's certain limitations on the size that you can build that I wouldn't know off the top of my head, but you should be able to rebuild.
We did discuss that.
Yeah.
Is it the same, the 1,800 square feet in between?
It's something
the
like that
five?
for, yeah, for your lot size,
Okay,
yeah.
because, again, I did ask that question too, I didn't know if it was the same, because everything's changing, or what?
I think you had a question on height is too, and I can't,
Correct.
uh,
I had a
that I couldn't say
height
off the
question
top of
and a
my head.
pitch question.
Yeah.
Okay.
The pitch is just a kind of a building code issue.
Okay, so who do I go to get that answer?
The building code?
Yeah,
Are you working with an architect? That'd be the first person I'd ask.
no, not an architect,
Okay.
because right now, we're just trying to fix, like he said, a problem that he has with a part that's collapsed.
Yeah.
And when he bought the house, it was already done, and now it's collapsed, and the pitch was only 112, which is not correct. But, you know, buying the house, it was as is, we're trying to fix it, and I wanted to make sure that zoning and building codes to this area, whatever we're fixing, is correct. So usually it's a 312 with asphalt shingles, but some areas call for a 412, so I just wanted to ask to get that correct.
Yeah.
Well, the key thing is that you haven't demolished the building, so it should be able to be repaired without any issue that I can see.
For zoning, for building code, he'll have to apply to.
Right, for the
2015
building, but in
building.
terms of being able to repair it, yeah, if it's an existing structure, now if you tore it down and wanted to do something different, then you have to go through a bit of a process, but it should all fall within the existing zoning, no problem.
But the existing structure that the awning was on, it was a 112 pitch, and that is not enough pitch to get the snowfall and the heaviness of that off, so that's why I was asking what pitch I'm supposed to have to put this back on.
His questions were, and I don't want to dive too deep in this because we can discuss
Yes,
this
that's fine.
at another time, but his question was not only on rebuilding, but enlarging it. So that was the issue.
Okay, thank you.
And just for your information too, this commission is a temporary commission, and we are here to basically review the zoning standards and so forth. We don't compile the zonings, we don't, make those decisions. We're gonna actually make a recommendation to the village board on changing most of the zoning and stuff. But your scenario or situation is very timely in our discussion, because we will be discussing those types of things where something wasn't maybe non-conforming, or something wasn't, quite up to code or whatever, it gets damaged act of God or whatever, then what do we do after that? And how can we allow the resident to take care of the building or the structure, and then proceed on? So I'm sure that Jim and then would be more of a point of contact to figure out the best way to handle that, because this is not the purview of this group.
Yeah.
But
Do we
I
have,
appreciate your input.
Do we have an answer for my first question as far as why it was done in the first place, to rezone everything?
Well, everything hasn't been rezoned yet that I'm aware of, so there is a zoning already exists. Right, so the only thing would be possibly changing in the future, they're gonna talk about zoning and maybe altering some things that are PUDs or something and changing their zoning, but we're not changing like R1 to R2 or R3 to R4. That's not my understanding is what we're gonna be doing, we haven't gotten that part of our analysis yet. So I don't know when your zoning was changed,
Okay.
and I'm not sure what time, when it was changed.
That was
We
just
didn't-
under my understanding of what I was
talking with Jim earlier.
Where can we
during the
find
week.
our current zoning, just to, like, is there a map somewhere that we have access to online that we can get easily?
There is, if you go to, the building and zoning department down there, there's, down towards the bottom of the page, if you scroll down, there's something that says zoning info. You click on that, it brings up several documents, and one is a 2014 zoning map.
Okay.
And that map has not changed, but some of the, names of the zoning districts, were changed last year. And that's what I was referring to in the
But the
conversation.
actual zoning of
The
individual
zoning map
properties
has not changed recently.
Okay.
And so you understand, if you bring something forward to zoning, and you actually have a public hearing and all that kind of thing, that goes in front of the zoning board of appeals and the planning commission in effect, because the two are the same entity. And I'm the chair of that. So I would expect to have you direct your questions to Jim in the building office and get what you need in terms of an answer. And then if it's something that you feel that you wanted to apply for something different or whatever, and then if it had to go to us, to the zoning board of appeals, that's where it'd be looked at.
Okay.
And so,
Thank you.
and we only make recommendations to the village is the ultimate decider, so anything you hear tonight, anything from my group as well, it's always a recommendation.
Gotcha.
Okay. Thank you for your comments. All right, moving on, no other further public comments, I only had 2 slips, just checking, making sure.
I didn't fill out a slip, you want, can I fill one?
Just so I can get your name, if you don't mind, just quickly, or at least after you make your comments, would you mind filling out the slip and then, just hand it so we can get, just state your name for the record.
My name's Greg Cholowinski.
Okay, great.
I also live on Pinto, I'm down the street from them. So I guess my question was, you know, I also have 3 acres, I currently don't have a structure on my property. I was looking to build one in the future, so I was kinda wondering, where does that fall? Am I able to, am I not able to?
And that's gonna depend on the zoning you're in, and I found which zoning you're in will tell you the types of structures or allowable structures, and then also that should be within, the building code, for the village. But, yeah, that would give you the guidance that I believe you're seeking for.
So right now, there is definitely an answer that's written down that you should be able to get,
Okay.
all right? What they're doing here is reviewing what was passed in the last administration.
Right.
And then looking if there's areas they wanna tweak or change something or add something
So that's what.
and all. So that's where there's already information there for you that you should be able to work from,
Okay.
okay?
So our neighborhood, that zoning didn't change, that's still the old zoning then, or that is the new zoning?
Essentially, there's no real changes in zoning
Okay.
and all. What was a question was because the county, when they had first created some of the developments, they never updated their maps, so when you call in on a particular piece of property, they'll look at the maps, oh, that's farm zoning, when it's only like an acre.
Mhm.
And technically, that's not what a farm zoning truly is, but it's just, so we've been trying to clean up 30, 40 years of things that have come to us now since we formed the village.
Gotcha. All right, thank you.
And if you wouldn't mind, there's a slip of paper up on there, and if you would mind just filling out that information and just hand it to Mr. Brown, that would be greatly appreciated. It's just basic information, name, address, and stuff, so thanks. All right, moving along, no other further public comment. Item number 5, review and discuss the draft articles introduced at the previous meeting of zoning commission. So Article 13, zoning approval process, 5A. Let's see. Our comments are. All right. Looks like the top of the agenda, 5A, it looks like there was a little bit of a change. I've been trying to work with Mr. Brown on some ways. There's a lot of changes. And so, some way to try to have a little bit better or clearer understanding of what changes were made and when, and, because otherwise everything's redlined, it gets a little confusing. And, but at the same time, I'm trying not to overburden burden Mr. Brown, with multicolors and, and different stuff. So we're trying to help everybody, at the same time trying to keep the task loading somewhat lower for Mr. Brown. But anyway, I think he came up with a pretty good idea here about the green underline and thing that said, hey, we've looked at this, we've worded it, you know, and this is what we changed, we kind of agreed on this information. And, so I think that's where we're, in the red line, the bold hasn't changed at all, but just the addition of the green to kind of help us a little bit. Saying, oh yeah, we looked at that, we reviewed it, and, not that it can't be changed again, but, we were pretty much in consensus of what that was, okay? So just moving along with that, on Article 13, I'm just gonna start scrolling through the pages here. I'm on page 1 of 21, and now I'm looking for the green, on page 2 of 21, and just seeing some of the things that we have agreed upon, just changing the names, you know, some typographical, grammatical, and some just words of contractors, consultants. Page 3, under page 3 of 21. Just clarifying that how we're gonna notify people of a special use, and we kind of went over that generally about what the responsibilities and duties were for village staff, and also what the responsibilities were for the applicant as well. Certified mailing, there was the situation there with 500 feet versus 250, well aware of Mr. Johnson's preference for 500, that's not in stone, so this could be always reviewed again, but I think the consensus was 250. So if everything's green, I didn't notice, I haven't seen anything I want to change. I'm on page 4 of 21, and then 5 of 21, I haven't made any notes. It looks like the part in green there's not a lot on page 5, there's only one entry on page 5. Page 6, I see just a couple words, zoning, and I made no notes. Then the page 7 was a common recommendation, should be accompanied by findings, which is sprinkled throughout this document. I did have a question about item number 4. This is on page 7 of 21. It'd be Delta 4, which is in red. And it says, special use approval shall be tied to the subject property, which we all agree, unless specifically tied to the applicant by approving ordinance. So it was just a little bit, I don't know if that's just a legalese or if that's just my, but basically approving ordinance. So obviously, the special use goes with the property unless it's tied to the applicant by approving ordinance. So could you help just kind of
So,
word that
for
out?
all special uses, there's an ordinance that is passed by the village board. And what this is saying is the default is to have that special use run with the land.
Correct.
Unless that ordinance states otherwise and ties it to the applicant. You want that worded differently?
Maybe it's just a different word.
Yeah, so, and I mean,
Okay.
the applicant by approving,
Yeah.
unless stated otherwise or something
Yeah.
like that, so just
Right.
to help clarify that for.
Yeah, and then the second part of that was, Mr. Teet's suggestion, that, he just wanted to clarify that an applicant could not transfer any special use to a different property. I mean, normally the ordinance is very specific, it states a PIN and it states, an address and a legal description, that's normally very clear in the ordinance, but I put it in there.
Okay.
So it'd just be like the existing ordinance, governing ordinance.
But you said unless specifically tied to the existing ordinance, or?
Or prevailing ordinance, it's lit, whichever one is in play.
Yeah, I think what Jim is trying to say is it's unless specifically tied to the ordinance that approves the special use. So he's not talking about the zoning ordinance. I mean, it could say unless specifically tied to the applicant by the ordinance that has approved the special use. I mean, he could say it said a different way, but that's what he means.
Yeah, I think that we could clarify that a little
All right.
bit, just
Okay.
wordsmith that a little bit.
Sure.
That'd be great, thank you. Yes. All right, pressing on, under item E, just, one green line on the bottom of page 7, little changes there. On to page 8, we talk about this change that will agree upon change that ceased operation for the special use. That's the only thing, one small change on page 8 page 9, basically accompanied by findings, which is again sprinkled through here. That's all I saw on page 9. Page 10, I see no changes. So page 10. Page 11, I think we made some changes there. From the last meeting, I think we talked about the stormwater development standards, that was in a recommendation. And then it looks like the different forms of transportation was added in there. I see I have no comments, I'm just waiting.
Do we have a stormwater ordinance today?
The stormwater ordinance that we have, it basically originally it followed the county stormwater ordinance, and I believe that's what we still have, unless we have had something that has been enacted that's stricter than that.
So I mean, that specifically states or village stormwater ordinance. I didn't think the village had a specific stormwater.
I believe it adopted the King County one, so that's what that's.
Right.
Is there,
And that way, if the village did amend its stormwater ordinance in the future, that this wouldn't have to be amended, because it says applicable,
Yeah.
so, yeah, that makes sense to have it in there.
Okay, thank you. Pressing on, then on the end of page 11, starting on page 12, I see no changes on page 12. And then on to page 13. Yeah, go ahead.
Prof, I'm sorry,
Sure,
can
no,
you go
no.
back to 11?
Yeah.
Does that say walking?
Under what, E, F, H?
H?
Does say walking, such as walking, modes of transportation, walking, biking, small wheel transport, the provisions of car or bike share facilities and various non-motorized modes of transportation, such as walking, biking. So if we're looking back to the top, what paragraph we're on, the deviations and restriction from district regulations. And it says design characteristics and amenities to be considered in this determination include but are not limited to the following. And then, so it's not limited. So basically I'm saying design characteristics and amenities should to be considered in the determination includes. So it's saying, hey, these is the type of amenities that should be included. Car, bike share facilities, all these type of walking paths. Again, I'm guessing walking is like walking paths, biking paths, I'm guessing small wheel transport. Anyway, those are the type of amenities that they would be used in the design phase. So that's my interpretation of it. All right. Not a requirement. Yeah, feel free to interrupt that, point something out anytime. So I'm just gonna be going through my notes. So the end of page, that's page 11, on to page 12. I had no corrections, additions, or anything on page 12. Page 13, I see no corrections, changes at all. On to page 14, no corrections, changes. Page 15, I see no changes or corrections. Page 16, no changes or corrections. Page 17, I have one comment at the very last line of page 17. It says create a desirable and functional open space environment for all site users. And this is under the umbrella of approval standards. And I just felt functional, like a little bit of wordsmithing there, but functional open space could be functional in many ways. It could be functional as passive open space, it could be functional as active open space. So what functional is also utilitarian, which is more use than aesthetics. So I would suggest maybe some verbiage to something in effect of passive and or like create a desirable and passive and or active open space environment for all site using, or something like either passive or active or a combination of both.
All right.
Cause it's kind of a broader context with what they're using, but I just didn't want it to have the premise just that it has to be functional, that it has to be a paved parking lot, or it has to be actively used, so. It's a minor point, but. Okay. That's all I had on page 17.
And page 18, I see no changes or comments on my side, no corrections. Page 19, I did have a question on 13.9, the sign permit near the bottom. And I guess my question is, we have, I want to get some understanding. We have a sign ordinance, I believe, or has that been incorporated, sign ordinance been incorporated into? At one time, there was a sign.
It's-
Whole chapter on
It's-
signs.
Yeah, 'cause I remember working
It's
on
an
it years ago.
yeah. I think just out of habit, I'm not the only one who refers to the sign rules as the sign ordinance, because they are so extensive. But
Right.
they're normally incorporated within the zoning ordinance, and that's the case here.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're separate.
And it's not very lengthy, so I'm not really worried about it, because I know how lengthy the sign ordinance can be, and all the different types of signs and dimensions and everything could be, and what locations and everything, but I guess my, question was making sure that we're not duplicating anything, or conflicting in any way, shape, or form with the sign ordinance.
Yeah, I left this in, I mean, normally I'm pulling out the things that refer to filing for a building permit. This paragraph really would be more appropriate for, the building permit. That would go on, this is the sign permit requirements, and that would go in there. I left it in. But the things saying whether you need a permit for a sign or not, I've been pulling out. Because we may change that, or go back and forth, for example, window replacement or siding might one day require a sign, the next year it may not. We don't have to change the zoning ordinance to do that. But that process, one, anyway, and two are really more building permit oriented than zoning.
I mean, I think it'd be much clearer if somewhere we reference, the sign ordinance, or the title of that ordinance, something not, so that it's at least
Yeah,
identify that there is something else that you need to follow, and this is
Right.
not the governing document.
yeah. Right.
I mean, I could see under maybe applicability and authority, maybe under the process would
Yeah.
be, maybe under the process would be referred to the existing village
Yeah.
document, or.
I mean, really, my suggestion now that you're making these comments would be to take 13.9 out and put it in with the sign, the rest of the sign.
Okay,
provisions.
all right,
I think that's where it belongs.
okay, all right, very good, very good. I like that. Okay, so we're gonna scratch 13.9.
And I'll move that to the sign, that you'll see something similar later.
Okay, all right. So then, continuing on to, page 20, there's just a licensed structural engineer, remember that comment at the very beginning, that's green, that was there. And I didn't see anything else on page 20. And page 21, I did not see any comments or changes at all on page 21. All right.
Can you, Jim, can you go back to page 20 for a second? Excuse me, is there a reference to the fire district? Maybe it's down a little bit further.
Yeah, at the bottom there. Police and fire district.
Yeah, right there, at the very last line. We actually have several fire districts, don't we?
Yes.
Yeah,
We have several, so.
might be plural.
Yeah,
Or
okay.
with an S with a parentheses
Yeah,
around it.
and they're all called, actually, I printed that out, they're all called different things.
Right.
They aren't simply called fire protection district, but anyway, I'll just say, I'll word that somehow.
Yeah, or appropriate, only the appropriate fire district, Cause this is under the guise of a temporary use permit, so you can figure out which fire district that
Yeah.
permit would be in.
Respect, it just said respect.
Yeah.
Yeah, respective fire, then you can just go to that district.
Okay.
Okay, very good.
All right.
All right, then, I did not see anything on page 21, which would, kind of wrap up temporarily, Article 13. way I see it, all right? All right, before we move on, any other comments, concerns? Now, obviously, we will be able to review this again, this is not, you know, cooked in bacon stone or whatever, or, you know, however you wanna look at it, it's not, we're not done with it, we're done for the time being with it, all right?
Okay.
Yeah, I think, the corrections were rather minor, so I think at the next meeting, we don't need to run through all of the green text again, just trust me, maybe I'll just pull it out, and I'll say something like a separate page, Article 13, I made these two changes, you can see if I worded it correctly.
Yeah.
And then
Well,
it
if
goes
you
on,
want,
it goes on the
a
shelf.
sidebar on the,
Yeah.
that thing, you just say, hey, this is what we did last week for everybody who wasn't here, and then this is what we changed, this few items, remove this section, and then,
But you won't see that entire article next time.
Okay.
Right. So we'll have plenty of other stuff.
Okay, well, cause we're, okay, yeah. All right, okay, so then, we're done with that, how about agenda item 5 Bravo, 5B, Article 8. There's a lot of stuff in here, thank you for the page numbers again, as you reorder that, so we got like page 1 of 19 now, so this document has been renumbered to help us kind of follow along.
Should 5A be zoning district? At the end of that paragraph?
5A.
Yep, I thought where we had district listed, that we had it shown as the zoning district.
I'm lost where you're looking at.
In B.
8.1A last.
Oh, 8.1, yeah. Yeah, true, that was in a different place, but I didn't put it in here. So within all zoning districts, yeah. Mhm. So you're looking at 8.1B, within all, add the word zoning districts, all activities, right there, right?
Yep, yep.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, we added that in one or two other places
Yeah,
and
just
just missed here, okay.
All right, good catch. Okay, I didn't have any other comments on that page, unless someone else had that page on page 1. There's page 2, looks like a lot of removal under, A.
Most of these changes are based on what I explained at a previous meeting, and trying to get away with this concept of encroachments. You know, a required setback, you're encroaching into the setback and just taking, where does it go in the required yard, and
Right.
measuring it from the lot line. So
Simplifies-
almost all of this
simplifies,
changes,
yeah.
is just trying to, revise that language to meet that goal.
Ralph, I have
Yeah.
a different question, more of a conceptual question. So, you know, the village wasn't formed till 2007, and
Yeah.
there's thousands of residential properties in the village that were built before that. So are any of the old zoning ordinances grandfathered in? Or as we make changes, are we gonna go around to all the houses and see who's in compliance with today's standards versus, you know, a house that could be there for 50 years?
You want that lifetime job?
I'll answer, no, I'll answer that.
But I think it's an important
Right,
question.
I'll answer the second part of your question first, because I forgot the first part, but the second part is, when we get to the zoning map, we will take a fairly detailed look at how many potential non-conforming structures and non-conforming uses we're going to create. And if we're creating too many, we're obviously gonna create some. If we're creating too many, then something's wrong, and we have to either adjust the zoning districts or adjust some of the dimensional requirements within them. Okay, so we will definitely look at that. Will we eliminate all non-conforming uses? No, because it's just not gonna happen. I don't think that there are a lot of non-conforming structures in this town, just given the large lot sizes, driving around, the setbacks in all directions seem fairly generous, so. But if anything was legally created, that's actually on the agenda tonight, I'll explain this. So if anything was legally created, it is grandfathered in, it's not conforming.
So at the time, the ordinances were under the county.
Yeah, whatever.
So if it was done according to the county ordinance at that time when it was built.
Yeah.
There's no change that has to take place, it's
No.
grandfathered in.
It's grandfathered in. And if we get to the non-conforming sections tonight, I'll repeat this, but they can continue to use the structure, they can continue that, if it's a non-conforming use, that can continue. The goal is to eventually have those non-conformities eliminated, but it can go on. I mean, in a different community I worked in, there was a non-conforming use, it was a landscaping business, mulch pile, that'd been there since 1960. And, it's existed for 50, 60 years. And, there are provisions like if the use ceases or if the structure's destroyed, can it be replaced? We'll get into that later. But in most cases, it's legal and it's allowed to continue. With possibly some restrictions.
So we have a lot of subdivisions that were built in the late sixties and early seventies that followed the county zoning at the
Yeah.
time. So, is there anything in this document that refers to what I'm gonna call the high reaching point of, that if you built before this became in play, that it's grandfathered in, or is there some verbiage in any of the village documentation that refers to that? But, not knowing the people that came in here, news travels differently, and, if you have a house in the village, and you bought the house and it was, met all the, current ordinances, we certainly don't wanna give the, appearance that we're gonna chase after all the homeowners to meet what the new
Right.
zoning ordinance are, right? And then the first part of the second part that, I confused you on is it just supposed to be targeted for new construction?
Is what's supposed to be targeted for?
The, updates to the, building codes, zoning ordinances, anything that's tied to that, is it specifically for new construction?
Well, if you have a structure that's already been built, and it was built legally under a previous version of one of our zoning ordinances, then it's a legal structure. And if the ordinance changes so that structure no longer conforms, then it's non-conforming, but it's legal. Non-conforming means legal, so it's fine.
I mean, that's what you have to remember about the zoning code. The zoning codes, then especially whenever they get revamped, are for the future,
Yeah.
are for what's happening coming in the future,
Pretty
kind of
much,
thing, is really what the
Yeah.
concern is. So unless you take a structure that would be grandfathered and demolish it, and then say, oh gee, I wanna rebuild the same thing, that's where people don't realize that, that's where you might, get into a situation.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, if it's repair, it's gonna be doable.
And we'll get into a lot more of this in the non-conforming section,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
really addresses a lot of these kind of questions.
Yeah.
But
I'm kind of a black and white person, so I go by what I read and
Sure.
then
Yeah.
try to make the interpretation from there. Nothing in all of the documents that I've seen refers to what Jerry just said, nothing.
Yeah.
So, and just, Jim, the comment that you just made, that non-conforming is legal.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you've spent your career in zoning. I haven't. Non-conforming is legal, it's counterintuitive.
You
make the statement, it rolls off your tongue, and I'm listening to it, and it makes no sense
Right.
in my world.
Yeah, and it is very confusing, and I think Jim has said before, sometimes people say legal non-conforming, well, it means the same thing. It's unfortunately a term of legalese, codified in the municipal code, in the Illinois Municipal Code, and regularly accepted in zoning law, that's not always defined in the zoning ordinance. The best way to consider it is non-conforming means it does not conform to the absolute rules of the current zoning ordinance, but it's still legal.
Because at one time it did.
Because at one time it did. And in certain circumstances, if you were to alter the non-conforming use, you may not be able to and keep your non-conforming status. It could be an illegal use. A simple example is a lot of communities in more urban areas, to combat density in housing, might have a zoning district where the lot widths are, let's say, 50 feet. And you have a lot of people who want to subdivide those lots into two 25-foot lots and build two narrow townhomes. So the municipality will modify that district to require 30-foot minimum lot width. So in any of those properties, you could only build one home. And that happens a lot in more dense areas. So that's a way to, the people who have already done that can still keep their 25-foot width townhomes, but no one else can do it.
So, I mean, this may sound political, it's not intended to be. My biggest fear is overreaching local government. And, you know, we've gone through a lot of the documents, but, it's an arduous task to review
Yeah.
them. I just don't wanna see us going down the path that we're trying to regulate every move that people make.
No,
No, and I don't think that's our goal or our intent. I know it's not mine. It really is a matter of like, kind of parsing a couple different people's words together. It really is looking at the future. If we change the zoning, whatever you had before, if it was legal, you're good. There's no problem. But, you know, if there's a change to that structure or something, there might be some limitations in the future on how it can be either maintain its non-conforming status or becomes conforming. So it could be rebuilt to be conforming, or it could maybe repair itself to stay conforming, alright? So, but there's no, I think there's a law involved here too, it tells us, it gives us guidance, on what we're doing, and it's at the same time, in the sense of telling people what they can or can't do with their property. But I think we're also, really looking at, the zoning we are not gonna be the people chasing people around, telling them, hey, now you have to move your house 10 feet, or, you know, or something.
Unfortunately, I've seen that happen, so.
Yeah, I don't think legally we'd be able to do
On
that.
4.2, just, the sentence doesn't read right to me, that says, which are limited to the maximum height of the district with the exception of silos, which are not limited in height. I don't know what the reference to the maximum height of the district means.
okay, so this paragraph, this is in a section that deals with accessory structures. So it's a blanket threshold, a blanket maximum for accessory structures set at 20 feet unless there's someplace else in here that allows the ham radio antenna or some other structure to be higher. And it specifically calls out silos, which have 0 limit. It specifically states, it must have been an issue before.
I think, Jen, it says the maximum height of the district is what I'm reading, and that's the part I'm confused with.
I'd have to take, we haven't gotten to that.
Zoning district?
Yeah, that's, you're right, I need to add zoning district in there.
There you go.
I'll add zoning district, and I haven't really dived into the, all the bulk and dimensional standards of our zoning district, but frequently, there'll be a maximum height, say in an R3 district that's, I think we do have, it's like 30 feet or 2.5 stories, or the commercial district is 40 feet, so that's what it's referring to. It should say something, whatever zoning district it is, okay? Just add that.
Just add that in. All right? All right, so,
Okay, tell me if I'm going too fast here.
that was general. I didn't have any other further comments on the section A, with all that red line there. I'm still on page 2, general regulations. I didn't, with all the red line, the rewording, most of it's taken out, just very few words, 2 paragraphs added in, so not a lot there. Unless anybody else had any other comments. I'll press on. All right, page 3. I think, is this top of the area, top of this one here, the discussion we had last time, Joe, about you wanted the information on lot sizes and everything to be able to make an informed decision. So I think this might come in here at the very beginning, I think, is here we're talking about lots of, 2 acres or less, 2 to 5 acres and over 5 acres and different, square footage in total. And, maybe I'm wrong, but I thought the last time you wanted that, some information that would help us know how many, roughly, how many, of these would correlate to that.
Yep.
And I know you did add, Jim, you did add those maps further down in, further down at towards the bottom of the packet. My cursory view on that, this is what, page 38, let's see. Oh yeah, that's page 63 of the packet near the end. I see a couple of the maps there, 2 draft maps and a first draft map. It looks like to me that obviously the pink or the purple is any greater than 4 acres, and then blue, 2 shades of blue basically, they need to be 1.25 acres and above. So anything blue would be like 1.285 acres and above. Green would be yellow, green, yellow, tan would be 1.25 acres below 2.
Yeah, I guess it'd be nice if you could make us 8 by 17 for the committee, so we can.
Yeah, you know, these are, if you have, you look at these on a computer, they're vector files, you can zoom in.
Yeah,
They
right.
are pixelated, so
Right.
you can zoom in.
Actually, quite
It'd
good.
be nice to have, you know, a hard copy that I can easily refer to.
Uh-huh.
That's my first comment. The other one was, I'm surprised, when you look at the colored versions, it gives you a different perspective on the actual property size, lot sizes of property in the village. Because, my first impression was that there's a lot of, lots that are greater than 4 acres, probably over half the village.
I thought the line of demarcation was 2 to 5, so why is the 4 identified?
It just, to me, it just seems to be what's on the legend, but I'm not sure if they
Yeah,
can make it differently. I guess you could make it differently on the.
I mean, that's where, you know, these documents get confusing when we use different values. So, I mean, it stated 2 to 5, and then now we're looking at 4, which I know is between 2 and 5, but it would be nice to have consistency.
Well, there's 2 maps. One is basically runs by the zoning district sizes, and the other one was just kind of a general one where I was trying to get it, I started with 5 and worked in increments back to, I mean, I can slice and dice this and have the GIS person.
I just
do it
think they should match.
in 10 different ways. I mean, I mean, what's on page 3 here doesn't necessarily match with our zoning district, so. And I did this was the first one that I did as a request of the GIS specialist that came back. I thought this was kind of readable, as Jim just noted. You see that about half the village is over, in lots 5 acres in size, a lot of that's agricultural zone. I thought that was useful, but yeah, I can slice this up and send in however many requests you want, but at some point, you know, I did it by zoning district as well, and I compressed. This one here is by zoning district, I'm sorry. So this one goes by zoning district, and I compressed the smallest 3 into 2, just because in general map making, when you get more than 6 colors on a map, or you start approaching 6 colors, it gets difficult to comprehend. So I have a color ramp of 7 colors here now, so then I would have had 8 or 9, so I kind of compressed that on the smaller heads. The other map was the one that has by 5 acre, and then goes 2.5 to 5, and then the smaller ones. But, you know, I can cut this up or request that the GIS person cut it up. You know.
I think there's to Kowarski's point, I think if we could follow the guidance in A, B, and C, so maybe we have lots over 5 acres, and then lots of 2 acres to 5 acres, and lots of 2 acres or less.
Okay, yeah.
And then, yeah, and I think that might, but really, okay, and that's great, we'll have that information, but I think more to the point of what we're talking about is, what do you wanna do? How do you ever subdivide that, as you had dice and slice it, what do you wanna do? And that, to the point of what's in there, the square footage and the footprint, I think that's what we need to address, so.
But a big difference between 5-acre residential lot versus a 5-acre and above, farm lot. I mean, when you look at the map, to me, you wanna delineate between, residential zoning and ag zone.
I think really, I'm just trying to take a step back, so we're looking at general regulations for accessory structures and uses. So are there any regulations on farming that would be different than residential? Or if you have,
For structures?
For
Yes,
structures.
Absolutely.
yeah, so then they would probably be handled separately, right?
The other thing, that the maps don't tell you, but it's sort of like maybe something that people wanna know, is how many lots are there that are 1 1/4 acre to whatever, something like that. Cause that gives you a little better perspective of that. So those 5-acre lots, if it's a house lot, it's different than, like you said, a farm lot.
Yeah.
I know that the farming
Yeah.
is given a lot of their own special, that way, but I think we can dice and slice this a lot of different ways, but I think really the bigger part of this is, if we're gonna allow accessory structures and uses, what guidance do we have, or do we like the guidance here, or is it just a matter of the size of the lot? Or should we look at the examples here of 900 square feet in floor area for the smaller lots, 1,800 for the, larger ones, and 2,880 for, which I'm not exactly sure where the 2,880 comes from, but it's a very interesting number.
Yeah.
So it doesn't seem like that should be in stone either, but I think, to me, the more the idea is, hey, what section are we in? We're in accessory structures, and if we're gonna allow structures to be on there, do you have a limit? Are you going to limit the size of that structure, to a percentage of the gross footage, or of the lot, or a percentage of the lot, or something? So I think, to me, that's the bigger portion. I think once you kind of get that, then I think you can peek and tweak the lot sizes themselves, whether it's 1.5 to 2 acres, or 2 to 5, or 4 to 6, or whatever it is, so.
Yeah, tell me what you wanna use a map for. I mean, I'm a map maker myself. I love maps. I'll bombard you with so much and make your head spin. So, and I'm serious, but just tell me what you want to look at, and I'll try and design a map.
What we're trying to do, Jim, is to
And
make it
what it is.
understandable.
Well, yeah, that's what I'm saying. When you
So
get
you
to the
don't,
colors,
you can't keep throwing different maps at it in different colors.
right.
So we need to delineate between residential housing and ag lots.
Okay.
That should be separate. I wouldn't use the 2 to 5, because there's a lot of 1-acre lots that are in the village that, met the county ordinances back then. It's not 1 1/4 minimum. That was an ideal, but they're not all 1 1/4. And we wanna have an idea of the number of lots that we have, or number of, housing units that are based on those sizes. So it's supposed to be helpful to people.
Right.
And there's a ton of information that if I was new to the village, I would be lost. Because it feels like this. So you look to just put things in a certain order that it can be followed. And I know we're behind the times, the zoning commission, the village has been formed in 2007, it's 2024, and there's things that we're cleaning up. And we're most likely not gonna be able to clean up everything. But as we go through this process, we're trying to use people's input to make it easily understandable. And we may not achieve that, but I'm not looking to add 10 more tons of information. But when you have a size that we're referencing, then keep that consistent through the document, so somebody can open it and say, the lots are under 2 acres, or they're 2 to 5, or 5 and above, whatever delineation we use. So it's not throwing more information at it, it's just making it more easily understood.
Right, and I thank you for your comments on there. I think we all would like that same type of useful information, but I think Jim's just saying, look, I can make whatever you want, so
Yeah.
what do you want?
And what's on page 3 is not consistent with our zoning district, so I don't know, how do you, like I said, how do you wanna divide it up, but,
When you say it's not consistent with the zoning district, what do
the
you mean?
sizes of the zoning districts are different
So, like R1, R2?
than what's in here, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that would be more applicable to us, would be to have, if we don't know what,
Yeah, what's your starting point?
yeah, what do we have?
Can you give me an example what you mean by that? For example, just, I'm confused by that.
There's maximum sizes of each zoning district.
Like R1, R2, R3, R4?
Okay.
Right. That's.
So that's what you're looking at talking about, then, is these actually cover maybe several different types of zoning districts. Then, that being the case, if you're saying 2 to 5 acres, you're allowed to have up to 1,800 square feet. So, well, there's, perhaps different, I don't know.
So on this map, I have color broken out, the dark purple, greater than 4 acres. That equals the RE1 residential district. They're supposed to be 4 acres or more in size. So that's the RE, those would be RE1 lots or agricultural lots. The RE2 residential district is lots 2 acres or larger. So that's the dark blue, that's 2 to 4, RE2, and so on and so on. So this map is set up to coincide with the sizes of our residential zoning districts. I didn't do commercial districts, I didn't do the ag districts.
It's just the paper, or not the paperwork, but the current document that we're looking at, it does not correlate. So that, I think that's what,
And those sizes of the zoning districts do not align with the breakout on page 3 of this Article 8,
and I think.
which I would suggest that we
Yeah,
correct.
that just makes sense, yeah, but we probably want to align those. Right. Go ahead.
Okay, so, I guess what I'm getting at here is, as I'm understanding here, about the detached accessory structures,
Mhm.
that whole section should be replaced by a table.
That would be much better,
That
yeah.
description, a table which calls out the zoning types and the allowable structures, number of structures within that.
I would prefer a table
And the
myself.
size of those structures.
I think that's a good suggestion, I like that.
Can you take a cut at that, Jim?
Easy.
And then, we can.
I love tables almost as much as I love maps.
Good. That would make it, much clearer.
Yeah,
As
it would.
far as, size, number, and district,
Right.
zoning district. I mean, originally, I think the idea of, based upon, lot sizes was fine, 2007-ish. But since then, we're now trying to address, specific, variants of zoning
Right.
and zoning districts. So we're putting out another concept that further, probably refines the, the
And
overall zoning
I would
process.
certainly have these size restrictions be aligned with the zoning district, not
Right.
these here.
Okay.
And I guess the question really before me now is, not without the maps, is, are these numbers, do they make sense to people here? I mean, is this, if you have a 5,000 acre lot, is that odd number of 2,880 square feet, does that come from pi or somehow?
That's a different subject.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think
Right now, we're just trying to lay out how to be able to read it.
Yeah.
Yeah, if we get the structure of a table, we can always fill in the table.
Yeah,
And some of these numbers, I know, like, I think the 900 is like a 30 by 30 building.
right.
And then I think the 2880 is a,
60.
yes, there is some dimensional building that was derived from.
Right. I guess my question, are these general, so if I'm gonna create a table, are these numbers kind of generally, is this my starting point?
I'd say it's a starting point, just throw them in
Okay.
there, and with a, you can put a question mark next to it.
Yeah.
Because it's definitely not in stone, we'll wanna come back and take a look
Okay.
at that.
Yep.
But it might be easier if people can see that table and
Yeah,
then say,
okay.
okay, how does this work in R1, or
Mhm.
R2, or R3, or R4, is it all
Yeah.
the same or different? And then we can go in there, like you say, fill in the tables we need.
Yeah.
Okay, so that section is section A, and that's under number 4, ABC, right?
Yeah,
Kind of that paragraph there, and it might incorporate some of the other ones, I'm not exactly sure, but it
Right,
might
yeah.
incorporate other parts of that, which would, clarify that. Okay.
Before we, put up the map, there was a section that we were on the accessory structures. And one part of it showed 10 feet from the lot line and one part showed 20 feet. I don't know if I read it incorrectly or misinterpreted it, but both values are sure.
so, here, it's up on the screen now, accessory structures must be at least 10 feet from any lot line unless otherwise allowed by the ordinance. That's right in the middle of the page there, 7.5 is corrected, and then, see if I can find it. 20 feet was the height.
So Jim, I think that's 7.5.
Yeah,
You know, in the one paragraph, we're showing two different districts and two different measurements. Sorry. So that's where it gets confusing, that we're saying that it's gotta be 10 feet from the line, unless you're in R4, then it could be 5 feet. And to me, those are separate and distinct. It's 10 feet from the line, and then have a, different paragraph for R4, where it's 5 feet. When I look at a paragraph like that, and I'm thinking back to the guests that came in here and didn't know they would be here till 12:30 tonight. It was a joke, but. That's where it gets confusing.
Yeah, you want me to
So it says-
re-paragraph it, yeah,
It says
okay.
10 feet, and then in the same paragraph, it says 5.
right, yeah, good, so we'll break that out, that's good. So I'll redo that. Is this in the same, as what we're looking at?
It was just underneath it. It was
Good, I'll just redo this whole
Yeah,
entire
yeah,
section.
just 5
Okay,
and 6.
good, yeah, all right,
The previous section 4 was all redone, so that should.
all right,
go
good,
well.
all right, good. Yeah, I'll figure a way to make that clear.
Yeah,
All right,
all right, very good.
yeah, I can do that. Just a general comment, when we get into some of the other chapters, the articles on the zoning districts, you're gonna see it urging me to do a lot more reparagraphing like this, because I don't think it's clear. So these suggestions are fine. I would have broken a lot of this out different ways.
Yeah, and just to reiterate this, this is not the work of Jim, I mean, we're taking what we had from Perry House Corporation that was contracted to do this, and we'll just work, that's our outline we're working from. Okay. I think we'll press on to B, accessory dwelling units, unless we have any other comments on what we were just talking about. All right, so there's a fair amount, we had, I think, a very good discussion last time about some of the accessory dwelling units, about whether to allow them or not. And I think the consensus generally was yes, I think it was probably a pretty good idea. There were some restrictions and so forth. Just in reading this, one of my comments I had that I didn't see any limits on the number of accessory dwelling units, maybe I missed it. I think there should be maybe a limit of 1 accessory dwelling unit per lot. That'd be our initial starting spot.
Yeah, okay.
It might just be,
Based on the size of the block.
Well, I think if we're talking about, it's an accessory dwelling unit, I think we're,
Oh.
of the override, not structure.
Yeah, you're right.
Okay, not a structure, we just changed paragraphs.
Yep.
But I think that, yes, John.
Well, the way it reads, the accessory dwelling unit, that's one.
Yeah, but we should specify. We should
I would put like, you know,
Yeah.
1A, or, you know, 8,
Yeah,
double
we
A.
should say,
I did.
that should be called out.
Only one AD lot per lot.
Yeah.
That'd be my
I agree, I think that's definitely a concern in areas where ADUs are allowed for non-related occupants, which it doesn't seem like that's gonna be the case here based on what you discussed last time. That's always a concern, so as a fail-safe, I would just include it in there. And
So could you, I'm playing devil's advocate, so could you have a 900 square foot ADU, but it goes up 8 stories?
No.
they'd be, if it was detached, it would be subject to the accessory structure, height provisions that are found elsewhere else in the code. And I know I was searching for this for the last 5 minutes while we were talking, but, you'll talk about this later with the size or maximum size of the accessory structures, not ADUs, but accessory structures. Looking back at the 07 zoning ordinance that was in effect up until, or those provisions up until they were amended in 2023, the only change that was made to the maximum square footage of accessory structures was to lots 5 acres or higher. The other 2 lower ones were kept the same. Right. So.
That dates back.
Now, why those specific square footages were in there in 2007, it's because they modeled the Kane County ordinance, why they put those restrictions on it, I don't know. And why the 2880 was put on 5 acres or more, we couldn't say without going back to look at the minutes. But that was the only change.
Just looking at percentages, it's like, if you have acre or less, if it's an acre, then it's 2%, 900 square feet is 2%. And then the next one up, that allows you to have, 1,800 square feet up to 5 acres, that's also 2%. Beyond it, it's like 1.8% for 5 acres, or on up, it's even less, perhaps less, but that, it's nothing clear cut now.
So I think.
Now, the
yes.
other thing about this too, though, be
Mike,
sure,
We got a new.
be sure to, be aware of the fact, you've gotta really watch that single family related kind of thing. You cannot base that. In fact, I think something we went with was something that is allowed is like, there can be 3 unrelated people, and that can still be a single family household. So that's something you really gotta be clarifying and make sure of, so you don't get caught in that, oh gee, you're only allowing single families that are related.
Yeah,
There's
I've
some
got a comment
redefinition
on
of
that, and this will be a starting spot for us. I would agree with your overall premise of outlining that. My starting spot is it should be a family member, child, or adult care providers, or other employees in service of the family. That's the starting spot, but that's what I think is like a family member, a child, or adult care providers, or other employees in service of the family. I think the general idea was not to use this as rental apartments, or rental units.
No, I understand that.
Yeah, so there might be a better way to say it, but that's kind of
It's
my
a
start.
discriminatory basis that you gotta watch for.
Yeah, but I think you're talking about a child, adult care providers, or someone that might have, you know, who needs, or special needs or something, you need somebody to help with that family member, and obviously family members. But anyway, there should be something in there along those lines. I think that was the consensus.
I don't think I would use employee, care provider and.
Yeah,
Things like
employee in
that,
service of
but-
family, but it could be a paid.
It could be a paid employee if you need someone to give hospice care or something like that, you know, so.
And that falls under the category of the care provider. If
Yeah.
you leave it open with employee, I can see that go inside.
Maybe adult or minor care provider, cause you mean a nanny or a au pair. Yeah, I know what you mean though.
Yeah. Like I said, that was my starting spot, but something along those lines is what I had the same thought process of making sure we did outline that. So I think that would be a separate addition, a separate line in here, maybe, C or another one of the, another bullet in there would be
the accessory dwelling unit definition. Is that correct? Is that what you're saying?
Well, the first comment I had was like, there's only been one, that would definitely be, that would be in the definition of the first part, under one.
Yeah.
And then somewhere in here, either in section 1, 2, or 3, or if you add another 4, but then you could add another line, but somewhere in that, subparagraph of B, you'd have to, I would add in or something.
All right, add, I'm sorry, I'm kind of lost.
That's okay.
Add.
So two
Yeah.
things I think we should add, there's only one,
One, I got
only
that.
one accessory dwelling unit, and then I think there should be a limitation. Have a family member, child, or adult care provider in service of the family, or something,
Yeah.
something like that.
That's a good starting point for discussion.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah,
Okay,
there might be
got
some
it.
there might be some nuances to that.
Yeah.
Our legal advice may be able to help clarify
Yeah.
that.
Yeah,
Right.
but I think those are two bullets that should be added to
Sure.
that list, that I had there. Let's see, what else did I have? I had a couple comments. Yeah, I think I had the same comment, like, where did the 900 feet come from? So, that was one.
And just for your information, I asked the county, and he really didn't have an answer. Now, he wasn't there in 1930s forward, the county, head of the county development department. But the other aspect was that he said actually more recently, when they started building taller houses, it became more of a height issue within the structure that was the bigger deal. So the 900 square feet wasn't as significant as well. Can you use that upstairs room as a bedroom or whatever, if it's over a garage and stuff like that? So
Yeah,
there are
and-
other factors that came into play there.
Yeah, and they are out, I thought they were outlined, somewhere I'll have to find my notes on there, I made some handwritten notes, but I believe it does talk later on about over a garage. It talks about if it's over a garage, not having a
Not
kitchen.
allowed.
Okay, it was actually allowed, but not kitchen was not
No
allowed.
kitchen.
Yeah.
Right.
So, I mean, you have to decide, if kind of taking a step back and looking at addressing an accessory dwelling unit, what's the purpose of the accessory dwelling unit? What do we want that to, what need do we want that to address? And then how to go about providing for that. I think also, I can't remember if it was this section or if it was in a later section, it did talk about the height was not to exceed, I think, 30 feet on that, but
20 feet.
or 20 feet, yeah. And I think another limitation should be, it's an accessory dwelling unit, so it really should not overpower the
Right.
primary unit, so it should always be less than the accessory, the primary unit. I think that should be in there. If it's not, it should be limited to not exceed the height of the primary dwelling unit. There was some talk about being within 60 feet of the primary dwelling unit. I don't know if that's really a necessity or not. I don't know if that's well, I guess what's the reason for that restriction?
Yeah, that, here it says 30 feet,
Or maybe 30, maybe we got this. But anyway, I guess coming back to a little bit bigger picture, I think they talked about whether they be attached or detached. I mean, to me, it doesn't really matter. I don't think that's really an issue for whether it's attached or detached. If you want to attach it, fine. If you want to detach it, fine. You know, if you want to just bump out your house or whatever, you know. I don't think that's really for us. I think if we want to promote or allow accessory dwelling units, you should say, hey, yeah, well, we just don't want it to, you know, I don't want you to have a 750-foot square foot bungalow and a 1,500-foot accessory dwelling unit.
Yeah.
You know, that's not the purpose of it.
yeah. So a couple of these numbers came from research on other things that are out there, and I threw them in here for discussion. And you can, because it's easier to see something in front of you and object to it than me not put it in and then
Sure.
it goes unnoticed. So the 900 just came from a couple of other ordinances I saw. I don't think it was from that AARP document. But 900 would be enough to allow a pretty good bedroom, lounge, a kitchenette, some storage space. I mean, that's what an accessory dwelling unit
It's
is for.
designed
That-
for,
that-
right.
When you think what the purpose is,
Yes.
it's for an
Right.
elderly parent or college-age kid or whatever. And I thought that was appropriate. I mean, we can tweak that or take it out. Same thing with the height. we can add.
Actually, I can see, it's on CI, on, with the top of page 4, it looks like it says the height of the structure does not exceed 2 stories and also does not exceed 30 feet.
Yeah, that's if it's above a garage.
Okay, okay, I see what you're there, oh, yeah, above it, that's a.
So if we go back,
So does it have that, like, not to exceed the height of the dwelling unit,
yes, in
within 30 feet of the principal?
the detached ADU does not exceed 1
One
story
story.
and also does not exceed
Exceed
20 feet in
okay,
height.
that's the one.
That's if it's detached.
Okay. Now, that's my question, is like, so what's the difference between detached and attached then? I mean, I understand the physical relative of it, but why would we make a distinction about that? If you have detached, you could have it higher than you could have it when it's attached.
Well, attached is gonna be like in an attic space, you're building out an attic space, or you're building something else. So it's the unit.
You could bump out a house, or you
Yeah,
could
you-
bump out a house, right?
you could.
And bump it out, you put a kitchen and everything like that, so it's the same thing, so.
Detached, again, for the detached anyway, was just to keep it clearly subordinate to the primary structure.
Okay. Yeah.
But again, you can, I don't care, you pull it
Right,
down,
right.
I'm just trying to say if this whole concept is to be something that is, again, we have to think about the purpose of this. This is not another whole single-family home, it's
Right.
an accessory to an existing structure. So,
In another configuration, think of, shipping containers that are typically 40 feet long and 8 foot wide, so it's a lot less than the square footage, but a lot smaller. I see a lot of those being, repurposed as homes
Yeah.
on property.
so again, I mean, this is just starting points. and
Sure,
Feel
absolutely,
free to,
yeah.
but
And I'm just
good
throwing out
question,
some
yeah.
questions.
Yeah, but I'm just telling where it came from.
Yeah.
And I'm not bound, this is not some great planning principle or thing that.
No, and I agree with what Jim's saying about the ADU being subordinate to the principal structure. I mean, 30 by 30, even on a single level, it's a decent sized structure for what is typically 1, maybe 2 people living in it, especially if it's not being rented out. So I've never really seen it higher than 900 square feet.
Right.
And if you go bigger than that, then you're right, I mean, you're really talking about a single family home. You're getting towards
You have another-
1,500, 2,000 square feet, that's.
You have another
a large structure.
consideration that most of the village that I'm aware of, has private septic systems. So that also comes into play with the number of people that are housed and,
Yeah.
there's a whole calculation for that.
Right, there, I think it may be more of a consideration for, like, let's say improving the second floor of a commercial structure to create an ADU that already has a single family home on the property. Then you might see something that's considerably larger than what you would build outside. If somebody, you'd probably find it less likely that someone's gonna build a 3,000 square foot building in their backyard and have their in-laws live there. Unless they're really nice to their in-laws. But if they already have a structure that's built with a second floor, think of a commercial building, you have the space. So that's probably why there's limitations of this nature, not just for attached, or detached, but for interior.
And I'm asking just an open-ended question here. So what do you think, about, there's a restriction now above a garage that it's not meant to have, like a refrigerator or something, so is that something that we want, or do we say, hey, it's okay if you have a fully functional, self-sustaining accessory dwelling unit above a garage? If somebody has, I got this nice big garage with this big pitch roof, I can just, build it out inside, then is that, I'm just asking what your feedback is.
That's where the loadings come into play, because it's design as a garage, is very different than design as living space.
Yeah, I agree, I think obviously that would go through engineering as well, if they wanted to do that, they would go through engineering and they'd say, hey, you gotta replace all the joists with 2x10s instead of 2x8s, or whatever it is, but, go ahead.
I mean, doesn't it seems like it's coming down to that there's some hidden restrictions in here by other provisions in village code, meaning sanitary, well and septic, power, actual construction, loading factors on an existing building. You have the setbacks from the property line, probably, garage and parking utilization. So there's a lot of parameters that have to be evaluated when you're considering an ADU that we don't even envision in this ordinance, in this part of the description. And I think it'd be worthwhile to maybe list, those other items that need to be part of consideration, even if you don't put them in the ordinance. We need to at least be aware of those as a committee, and for the sake of the people that aren't here, in these discussions, I think it would be helpful at least put those comments in there, and maybe incorporate them into the document that they need to be reviewed by a, professional engineer before,
Yeah. Well, they'll need to get a building permit for whatever they do.
Right, it would be in the building permit, but by that time, it's already too late, because people are already proceeding along the lines that, well, I can put an ADU on my property, and then they suddenly realize that by the time it gets to engineering, it's already too late. And they get turned down after building their hopes up.
And then would the homeowners association, if they have one, take precedence over the village zoning?
Yes.
Yes.
So I look at it this way, Jim, we can keep on adding things. To me, this is another one of those deep subjects that requires a lot of time, energy, and scrutiny, and it takes away from us with the original charter that we have of being able to review what was submitted to the village and be able to make a recommendation. This puts us off on a whole other tangent, and we lose our focus on what we should be doing. So, I mean, we can keep on adding things, we'll never get done. We'll never complete it, and I don't think that's why the zoning commission was formed. But a subject matter like this completely takes away from what I think we should be working on.
I think from a zoning perspective, a zoning ordinance, this is sufficient. What you're probably referring to are, a lot of municipalities will do all types of guidelines, how to build a deck, what you need to consider, how to build a shed. And they'll have a 4 or 5 page document on that guides people considering a deck or a swimming pool. I mean, at a swimming pool, I used to get beat up all the time on that. How come it's taking so long to get my swimming pool approved? Well, because it has to be reviewed by a plumber, an electrician, a structural engineer, a landscaper, carpenter. There's like 6 or 7 reviews that it's farmed out to. But that's not in the zoning code. The zoning code just says you can have a swimming pool. You gotta do some due diligence. But, at some point, the village perhaps can create these documents, I wanna build a deck, what do I need to do? I wanna have an accessory dwelling unit, what do I need to do?
Perhaps,
But I necessarily wouldn't put all of these other non-zoning requirements, I wouldn't, put them in here. I think it just takes away from our time and clutters things up.
Big factor to all this too is you've gotta remember you need to know the definitions of all these different terms. So I just looked up in the zoning code how they define family, and accepting domestic employees, any number of persons related by blood or marriage, or not to exceed 5 persons not so related, using common cooking facilities and living and eating together on the premises as a single housekeeping unit. So, if you don't know what the definitions are of things, so that's where it's really critical to look at the whole stack of paper, because quite often then this stuff is gonna refer to the more detailed things farther along into it. So it's something else, that's for sure.
right, so, I think Mr. Joe Gavarski's, comments, well, we don't wanna get sidetracked and go down to, but at the same time, there were definitely, things people need to be aware of before they start getting into this. A suggestion I may put out is if we added line 4, just add something to the effect of, the applicant should seek consultation, with the village staff or something along those lines. The applicant should consult with village staff prior, for other village code requirements or something along those lines.
Yeah.
Well, so,
That'd be one suggestion.
so the people that came here tonight, I don't know how long, they've had their houses. But I don't think the village was able to answer their questions. So this speaks to what I'm talking about, of here's existing homeowners that have a issue. They go to the village to get the questions answered and they're not answered. And that's where I look at the total volume of the data and documentation. Confusing on one part, but this is a real life example. You have a couple of neighbors that come in that think that they should be able to get a simple answer and not be able to get a simple answer. And I don't think what they asked was anything as complex as an ADU or anything else. So take a step back from who we are and what we're doing. Here's a real life example of people coming in, and their question isn't answered.
But that's not the question for this zoning commission.
I understand.
So I understand your point, but that's not a
But-
topic for us tonight.
Yeah, I understand, but
Okay.
it goes to the totality of what we're doing.
Yeah, I understand the frustration, but that's not our topic to deal with, so we pointed them in the right direction. Hopefully they will get their answer as soon as they can. So I think the ADUs are a good point, a good aspect to have in the village. I do like, I think there are, it could be fraught with challenges. But I think to not address it at all would be even more difficult when someone comes in and says, hey, can I do an ADU? Like, it's not addressed in the village code. So I think we need to address it.
Yeah. I wonder if that isn't more appropriate for specific zoning districts. You know, we say, 2 acres or more, 4 acres or more, so RE1, RE2 only permitted in certain districts? Or detached?
No, I wouldn't think, I think that'd be a problem, actually, and I think that you can't envision every option out there. If you want an accessory, it could be just a little bump out on a small house, and then there would just be a little kitchenette in there, and it would not be a big deal, so it could be very different on a small lot, so. I think,
I'm sorry to interrupt. ADUs are a very tricky animal.
We're finding that.
And from what I've seen, I'm sure Jim has seen, it's really an all or nothing approach. And it's probably difficult here to try to decide, even if personally you believe that the village should have ADUs, to decide how they should be created at this stage might be a little difficult. ADUs have great purposes, promoting affordable housing in areas where a community has not reached to the minimum level is always a concern. A lot of communities want to get rid of ADUs. 30, 40 years ago, even more recently, communities want to get rid of coach houses because they can't control illegal rentals. You don't have enforcement staff here to be going door to door and try to figure out what's being rented, what's not. What I might suggest is maybe to get from staff, maybe direction from the board to see if the village is even considering ADUs first, and then go back to it. And if the answer is yes, then this is the right time to talk about it. If the answer is we're not ready for it yet, then it might not be the right time. Because we can always come back.
Right.
The board could say, 6 months from now, a year from now, we would like to address or look into ADUs, and then the ZBA would review a potential text amendment. So, even if it's not done at this time, when this zoning ordinance is passed, it can be done. But not knowing whether it's desired yet, it's probably gonna be hard to figure out what exactly we want to put in there. Just my thoughts.
Thank you. All right, with that suggestion, would you like to follow on with that suggestion, or do you have a different opinion? What you'd like to do? Would you like to get some guidance from the board?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, and I will say, the 2023 ordinance allows attached ADUs.
Attached.
They allow attached, they do not allow detached.
Yeah.
And they do not have all of the other parameters that I added in red necessarily, that really was not that. You just see at the top, that paragraph 1 that's crossed out, that was pretty much it, I think. I'd have to go back and review, because normally I would have had and then paragraph 2 and 3, down at the bottom where there was virtually no changes, so.
I think the concept of being attached had to do with the fact that you definitely knew that the homeowner is involved with the relatives, the children, whoever, and also that there's some, and especially if you have an elderly person, you don't want them all in the house by themselves and you have to run across the yard to get to them, kind of thing, and then down the line, if you go to sell the property, will these be, something that's, people are looking for, or is it like the typical in-ground pool that, boy, you gotta find just the right buyer that wants an in-ground pool, so it's all these different, issues
Okay.
that are out there.
Right.
Jim, do you have a comment? Back over there.
I guess, what I was thinking is if we take, if you have the revisions you talked about today, Jim, to the section, and maybe there's a point of running it past the board to see if, detached ADUs or any other considerations should be, given, and let them decide whether it's the zoning commission, the planning commission, or whoever should be responsible for drafting, further action on ADUs.
And I think with the knowledge that like you say, it's challenging, it's not an easy,
It may be, I mean, even without knowing which way the board would go, there's certainly cleanup that needs to be done. I mean, there's an accessory unit section, there's an accessory dwelling unit section already in the ordinance. They sometimes refer to the same thing, sometimes don't, so there's definitely cleanup to be done. I imagine whatever changes you suggest, the board's gonna have significant discussion on it before it's approved. So, whatever approach you decide is, I can't recommend one versus the other, but, given the fact that it was already in the ordinance that was approved, just not fleshed out quite a bit, you could take the approach of, well, here are the suggestions we would make to these areas, and then see what the board decides. They may keep it the way that it was, and not allow detached, or they may take this suggestion.
So
It's a good
it should
point.
be treated as separate subjects though, correct?
Probably, yeah.
I mean, attached and detached, big difference, and as we
Right.
go through the verbiage, may apply on one and not apply on the other.
Yeah.
Our last
Right.
meeting, we talked about the virtues of that, the family aspect. I can see it being a bone of contention in neighborhoods where people don't wanna see another house on the property right next door too. I mean, it's a can of worms.
They both have self-limiting features. An interior ADU is going to be limited by the size of the structure itself. I mean, you're not gonna wanna take over your entire second floor to create an ADU. And, a detached is usually by financial reasons, and you already are proposing at least that, they have to be similar building materials. And, there are ways that you can bend that, but just building a structure of 900 square feet, it's not
With the
inexpensive.
foundation.
With the foundation.
Footings.
And a lot of HOAs don't allow a second structure dwelling unit, so they're both self-limiting in essence, but you wanna be prepared for, the person that wants to build one.
all right, I think we beat that pretty well.
Yeah, I think, how about if I do this? Let me try and take a stab at reorganizing this, make it clearer it's kind of this way now, an attached, list the parameters for that. Then have a second paragraph or number, detached, list the parameters for that. And then that, at some time, either when we complete the document, or perhaps before, that's forwarded for just comment to the village board.
And prior to the review.
Prior to the public hearing or
Yeah,
prior?
yeah.
Jim,
I don't know.
That's different than what Rob said though. We shouldn't be discussing the, detached if it isn't part of it without getting the input from the board. There's no reason for us to spend a lot of time, energy and effort and then the board say, we're not gonna, we're not gonna allow that at this time. We need to get the input from the board on that aspect before you tackle it.
I'll just throw out my fault, not much. I've been down this road before doing a comp plan, which was for the plan commission to do, and that was their document. And I don't know how many times, it's your document, okay? And you are to forward that to the village, the city council in this case, and they can send it back to you, they can delete it, they can tear it up, they can approve it. And they wanted to piecemeal, they were afraid to put, for a variety of reasons, they were afraid to put certain provisions in, and they wanted to go to the city council to get, and we wound up going for an entire year in a big loop with no one willing to make a decision. I just don't want to go down that path here. I'd like us to put together a document at some time, and the village board can delete whatever they want. If this is an issue that we think the village board needs to review before then I'd suggest we just pull this out. It's not an agenda item where they review, but I just don't wanna get into that. I had a bad experience with this before, because our task is to present at some point an entire document, and they can pull things out, paragraphs out, whatever. I don't wanna get into this loop of.
I understand, but the premise that I was asked to join this commission was a temporary assignment.
Right.
With about eight meetings. There's no way we're gonna cover
Well, yeah.
anything in 8 meetings. I didn't want this to turn into be a full-time job. I think it's pretty simple to just get some direction from the board before we go too deeply into it. We can create a document that's got 10,000 pages, and it's not gonna make it better or easier for anybody. So
I understand.
I thought what was stated was that we would get some input from the board, and if they want us to look at it, then we'll look at it. But I don't think we should be looking at it without their input.
No, I understand what both of you mean, and I understand, the way that I said it too, but Jim does make a good point. The direction from, for the fact that you were appointed was to provide a document for the village board to review after the final hearing. And, to what Jim said, he's changed my mind. What would probably be the best, and thank you, is to make your suggestions, give them to the board, let them decide. And if they wanna send it back, they can send it back. But if you're looking for direction now, it might be best to get it from Jim, get it from staff. I can speak with Jim, village administrator, we can discuss if there's some suggestions that we can make. But to ask the board to tell you right now what your direction would, like Jim said, be kind of going in a circle. So I think it does make sense. I take back what I said.
So, and from here to here, in between is the public hearing, so the
Right.
public's ready to have comments
Exactly.
too, so.
That's
it's
part of
not
our-
just-
part of our
So, yes, is ADUs a difficult subject to bite off? Yes. And you may not all agree on it, but at that point, because you don't have final authority, you just take a consensus vote, and whatever the majority is, that's what the language that goes in there. You really can't have a, caveat, this is what the dissent said. You could, maybe have some sort of statement prepared
Yeah.
for the people that don't
And-
agree,
and I
but
understand
you have
that.
to provide one document.
I understand that, I respectfully disagree. So the input from Jim, it's very valuable, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we should be following that. The role that you play on behalf of the village, very valuable, doesn't necessarily mean that we agree with that. So I've reviewed the meetings that we've participated in so far. There's a lot of information, there's a lot to go through. It's a lot more than we had anticipated. And I don't wanna speak for Rolf or Jim, maybe you guys can throw your own opinion in. When I make a commitment, I see it through. It's an important, task that we've been asked to provide, but it's very laborious and cumbersome, and I see no end in sight.
Well, I'd hope to give you some hope. There is an end in sight, but it's like eating an elephant, it's one bite at a time, all right? I think we've beat this up pretty well. What I think I would like to see, would be, I would, at least staff, the administrator, maybe even, the village president, you get together and say, look, do we wanna even go down this? Your idea of just look, we've already got this, we already have the accessory dwelling unit that's already attached, right? This is just about detached.
Right.
You want it to organize, put two like that, that doesn't seem like a lot of work to me. So I think we'll just do that, get some guidance, and if they wanna go ahead and do, and then we'll just kinda follow along with what we have now, is that we'll either get a little bit of guidance for them to say press on, or just cut the whole accessory dwelling unit out of there, and then we'll, all right? That's what I'd like to do, all right?
Okay.
All right, let's move on. Otherwise, I'm gonna go nuts. All right, so accessory dwelling units, that's, we're temporarily pushing that, and that's, Jim Brown's got that for action, all right? Okay. Okay, page 4, so just continuing on with that page then, page 4, 19, amateur ham radio, just like, just a couple of edits there. Mr. Colbeck?
Yeah, we've got some inconsistencies as I'm reading through all the different sections, about towers and structures. Ham radio operators put up a 75-foot tower, but other sections like with windmills, there's three, I'll probably come back to them later, but the point is that we've identified when we permitted, windmills or, turbines, that they have to be within a fall zone of the property. There's no provision for that for the ham radio operators, towers, which are probably, less, engineered than a wind turbine. And I think we need to apply that consistently through all the, sections where, something is built up and could be allowed, or not allowed, but could fall off a person's property. And then the question becomes, are they freestanding, are they guides? So there's a lot of implications in that, but we gotta come up with consistency, on those structures.
There may be an issue that involves, is it FCC, whoever, but the right to communicate.
Right.
That may say, yeah, towers can be a little bit bigger than, or zone, I don't know.
Right. But my point is that if we're restricting other objects to within a fall zone of the property, then I think we need to be consistent across all those different types.
I think what Jerry's referencing, Mark Rooney, the administrator, I've had this issue before, and what you were saying, the federal government gives some latitude and restrictions on local zoning on ham.
Communications.
Yes, and we'll have to look at that and get very specific what that.
I can review.
Yeah, and I think Mr. Colbeck also makes a good point, you're referring to things of something structures and not just towers, it's a structural tower, or something, but I would agree with that. And there is, I know with the windmills, there were definitely fall zone requirements in there, so something would, and that's just a safety factor, I don't think that the FCC is gonna have a problem with that, so.
I'll review and.
Yeah, okay, all right, very good. Anything else on the ham radio operators? All right, pressing on, this looks like, book exchange box is just a zoning lot, just one edit there on the bottom of page 4 of 19. On page 5 of 19. Looks like grammatical stuff under carports, just spelling out the numbers, and then electric, charging stations.
Yeah, I will add, Chris Teaton sent a comment today, let me find it here and I'll read it, I thought it was a good one, on carports.
You guys turn your mics off.
Chris said, carports must be located over a driveway, that's the current text. Quoting Chris, I feel driveway should be replaced with paved surface. This would allow someone to put a carport next to their garage, assuming compliance with side yard setbacks.
Yeah, I like that, over paved surface, yeah.
All right?
Yeah, I got a question about, it says a carport must be a minimum of 10 feet from any lot line. Shouldn't that be referencing the setback?
The carport must be, yeah, well, that is then the setback, 10 feet.
Yeah, that is 10 feet.
So it is
That would be the setback.
Right, so your house probably has maybe perhaps another setback if you had a carport, it's just like you can put a deck that goes whatever, air conditioning unit or,
Encroaches into the setback.
yeah, please, a gazebo.
All right, any other comments from Mr. T?
Not on the carports,
Okay,
yeah.
all right, thank you. If nothing else on the carports, then the electrical charging stations, I didn't have any comments on that.
I will add, here, Illinois, I think went into effect June or July last year, so new residential construction, particularly multifamily residential, is required to be set up for EV charging. So,
Who would be responsible for determining if a charging station equipment is in good condition?
Initially, when it gets built, there's a plan review and a building inspection.
This is maintained. Who's gonna be responsible for determining if it's maintained in good condition?
Well, that's the enforcement staff, yeah. To get a complaint and go out and see, is it functioning, does it work? And then tell the business operator, whether it's, if it's at a gas station or something, hey, fix this.
It's an unfunded mandate, Joe.
Okay, nothing else, on to fences and walls, G, which I believe, we have a fence ordinance, right, or has that been?
Yes.
So we have a fence ordinance.
Well, that's here, as far as I can tell.
So there's no, separate fence ordinance?
I don't think so, is there, Carmen, that I've seen?
Yes.
This is it, our fence,
One time there was, I'm not sure if it was incorporated, so it's been years since I've been involved, but at one time there was a fence ordinance, cause I remember talking about electrified fences and chicken fences and all kinds of
It was
stuff.
separate before because of the Kane County Code.
Right, yeah, so I just, my caution here is that, okay, if we do have a separate fence ordinance, then I don't wanna make sure that they're
Sure.
not, in conflict with each other, and maybe one can reference that fence ordinance.
Mhm.
So let's just ensure if we do have one or where it is, so.
It was deleted in its entirety, it was deleted.
Right, any prior restrictions on zoning would have been, superseded by the 2023 ordinance.
This one?
Yeah, and then this one will do the same when it replaces.
Okay, so there is no current existing fence ordinance?
It wouldn't be
Well,
valid.
this-
Yeah, I mean,
this-
yeah,
this-
yeah, this is it.
This
right.
is the zoning code
Okay.
that we're going
The
with.
one we adopted, so, okay. So I just wanna make sure, it's kinda like the dark skies lighting ordinance, I just didn't wanna make sure we are not.
We were not, conflicted, all right, so knowing that that's not then, okay.
Can we separate between residential fencing and livestock fencing or non-residential? 'Cause as you read through it, it references both types.
I guess it would depend, because you have, height and fence of walls, you could have height and fence of walls within a residential, height and fence of walls within a non-residential, or you could break it.
That's how it's current.
Yeah, so you break it into, it's how you ever wanna break it up, but it's. Six one half,
It's
six one
very-
half the other.
Yeah, it's very different from residential fencing to farm fencing. I think they should be separate.
Yeah, if you want, I could reorganize it, I mean, break it up.
Yeah, just to
Just as a way that you organize, I can do
Right.
residential and non-residential fencing, and then. just
Or,
move
or
things
even like
around.
you have height, like number two, height and fence of walls.
Yeah,
You
they
get
break
height
it
in
out.
Residential districts, you get a height, and then height in not agricultural, but height in non-residential districts, so.
Okay, we've got that, so.
But I would prefer Joe's way, if that's what, if you want me to take a
Yeah,
step.
I'm happy either way, whatever you want, either way is fine with me.
All right,
I think that's got more clarity, doesn't it?
does.
And that might help with certain things, like I've got some questions about, it talks about a maximum height of 5 feet,
Mhm.
corner yards, but that might make a difference whether it's
Yeah.
inside
I think-
there, so that
I
might
think it'd
help,
be easier.
clear those things up. Two CII, it's just a little bit of, it's just a typo in there, on all other areas, A fence 3. Just
He's 2C.
the very last
Oh, yeah, I
sentence.
see.
Yeah, just, it's just a little typo there.
Yeah, page 6, sorry.
And no worries. Let's see, there's one more comment. Yeah, and I'm not sure how that would all come up, but, comment would be under the next page, which would be page 7, the top part, under barbed wire, chicken wire fences. You'll have to make that decision of, you know, residential versus non-residential, right?
Yeah.
I get it, what they're trying to say, like chicken wire fence not around your property, but, you know, can you have a chicken wire fence obviously around your vegetable garden, or to keep your pet hamster outside or whatever, you know, so.
Right, that should have been clarified.
Yeah, so just, probably wanna reword
Yeah.
that, just to make sure it's clear that what they use for, that chicken wire fence is for.
Can you go back one page, Jim? Okay, yep, right there, on C, go up just a little bit, C,
Sorry.
nope,
Keep going?
Going down.
You're going the wrong way.
Oh, sorry.
yep,
There, okay.
okay, just that last sentence on page 6.
Yeah,
we
yeah,
talked
that's all,
about
that's what I
that.
said.
Then can you go to the next page? Is it supposed to be barbed wire on 3C?
Oh, buried wire?
Oh, barbed wire, yeah. Mm-hmm. This guy thinks spell check doesn't pop out on, yeah, barbed wire. Mm-hmm. Let's see.
And then the fence height for public recreation areas?
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, to me, that's a separate subject from residential and farm fencing.
Uh-huh.
I think was it gonna be residential and non-residential? However-
Yeah, and however much I have to break out
Yeah.
on residential, I can do with that.
So, okay. So right now, around Corner Farm, there's barbed wire fencing. Is that basically grandfathered in, or is that, because it's not really agricultural?
It would be non-residential, right?
Well,
Of course,
still
They've got
agricultural.
cattle up there.
Yeah.
I mean, it's technically it's zoned forest preserve, or that's a.
Open space.
It's open
Yeah,
space.
yeah.
It's barbed wire around the perimeter, not around the
They have
corrals.
livestock there though.
But not around, not the open space areas. Around the corrals, I could see,
But the livestock's not, yeah. Anyway, without getting in the weeds, I think maybe if we reorganize this
Yeah.
first,
Mhm.
and then we can pick it, a little bit cleaner, on the next go around. All right, let's see.
Then do we have a definition for home-based business?
Well, before we go there, Joe, it's 8:25. Okay, so would we like to stop there and then probably take?
I make a motion, we adjourn.
All right, so before I entertain that motion, could I just ask if there's any other direction that Mr. Brown would like from us before the next meeting? And, comments, and then I'll accept your, motion, okay? Is there any direction from us that you would like?
As I understand, let's revisit the maps briefly. As I understand it, I'll request maps be made to, if you want the breakout that was in that one section that we looked at, not the zoning districts, but in that one section on residential districts. I would not, I'd switch everything over to the residential districts myself. So I kinda had that, I won't compress the bottom 3 districts this time. There is normally an Excel spreadsheet or some type of number file that is associated with each of these maps. I can take a look at that and tabulate if you wanna know the number of lots in each of those districts. I can also ask, this might be a little difficult, to do a map that excludes the agricultural zoned properties as well, so we're just doing the residential zone. So that's what you
Okay, yeah.
I can take out commercial properties as well, that might be a little difficult
Yeah.
for the GIS people to do.
Maybe
but-
on discussion you'll figure
But
out.
I can do that.
All right.
And then, if you want paper copies, I mean, I'm happy to make a series of 11 by 17s and, or whatever, or I can have them.
I won't need one, but it looks like
Yeah.
some people would like
Yeah.
them,
If
so.
if you want those here, I can have them
Yeah.
available for pickup at Village Hall.
Yeah.
I only got a week to do this though, if you want it by next Wednesday, but, that's what I'll request. I think I've got good guidance on reorganizing a couple of these sections here. And then next month, next meeting on the 13th, I will have all of the animal provisions compiled into one, either article or section, and those will be grouped together, and I'll forward that as well.
All right, do we wanna continue with what we have here, finishing up with here, and then go to non-conforming uses, or do you just wanna start tackling the animal stuff?
Well, I think we're gonna finish this.
Yeah,
Yeah, well, I would finish, I think the rest of chapter 8, it gets relatively, well,
Yeah, permitted
famous
homes.
last words,
Yeah.
it gets relatively easy after this. Well, no, it doesn't.
Yeah.
Because we get
Well, you
I
don't
would
have to
recommend we
rewrite
stay-
as much as you rewrite.
I recommend we stay on
Okay,
task
all right.
with this.
So,
I take
Open
that
up a
back.
new can of
So,
worms.
at some point, I think it would be beneficial, because it keeps coming up, to do, maybe we start off with the non-conforming Article 14 first.
Okay.
Because that seems to keep popping up, so people
All right.
understand that, and get a good feel for what is allowed, what isn't allowed, what it means, and we start off with that, and then we
Okay.
go into other.
I think we can have a minor topic discussion, but I'd like to continue where we are.
Yeah.
Finish this one, as best of our ability, and then maybe go to non-conforming.
Okay, and then into animals, I'll do the agenda there.
Yeah, the other
Time
question,
permitted.
the other thing that keeps coming up in my mind is definitions. I know
Yeah.
there's a section in here, I don't know, it was 2 or something, that you listed a lot of definitions. I wonder if that would be helpful to go through, so that before we get to non-conforming. So
It's been forwarded, but I haven't really done a super good job of going through and updating that, that's like, but I can.
One way is just simply print out, anybody wants a full copy without any of the changes or anything.
Yeah.
Of the zoning code as is, and then you can sort of see where things occur within it.
Yeah.
And all, and that might answer, well, gee, is the ordinance, here, or is the fence ordinance there, that kind of thing.
I'm normally going through like certain terms, I'll look at our definition, and if they pop out, like, as if they need revision, then I make a note of that, and I'm keeping a running list, or I add it to that one document that I forwarded, but it's, you gotta kinda stay, focused on one thing, and then the definitions are important, so I'll call that out, just like we had family brought up tonight, and we discussed it.
All right, with that, then I think, we are not gonna get to finish Article 8, and we will not get to item 6, which is the introduction of nonconformities. So at this time, I will take the motion to adjourn.
It was already made.
Thank you. I got first by Mr. Gavarski, but I have a second for the motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
Second, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you for coming, appreciate your participation.
Time is.
James.
I got money, 8:30?
8:20, 8:30.
I'll work with you.